Wow, that was such a wonderful episode. Sometimes for myself doing therapy for so many years, I feel like, oh, I kind of know all this stuff, but that girl, that girl Sabrina, she taught us some new things. There's some eye openers in this one. I think everyone's really gonna get some valuable gems from this conversation.
Yeah, she's written a beautiful book, which is, as she puts it, for people who have trouble accessing counseling. So she's in Canada, but even there, she has a long wait list. So definitely listen to the episode and then maybe check this book out. It could be just what you need for someone, either you or someone in your life, or all the above, who are experiencing issues that maybe can come right back to that core belief about who they are. And it's such a good place to start.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are so glad you joined us today. As every week, we're always happy to see you and have you here with us. Today, we're going to be speaking with Sabrina Trobak, the clinical supervisor of Trobak Holistic Counseling, which she opened in 2010. She holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and has extensive training in treating family violence using a holistic therapy approach. She has a bachelor's degree in education and worked in the public school system for over 20 years, teaching in all divisions, elementary, junior high, senior high, as well as a learning assistance teacher. And she has taught a variety of other grades and subjects and served as a vice principal as well as a school counselor. Sabrina published her book, Not Good Enough: Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety, in 2023, as a resource for people who are unable to access counseling but want to work on their mental health. And that's really such good work. And we're really excited to have you here. Thank you for being here, Sabrina.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So in preparation for our talk today, I did a little background on Sabrina, and I found all this amazing work that she's doing. And it's perfect to be having this conversation with her right now because in October, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So Sabrina is the perfect person to be talking to. And I'm super excited to be having this conversation because she does a lot around a couple of things. Number one is holistic counseling. And I think this is maybe a new term for some people, but if you go to her Facebook or whatever, you'll see her walking the walk and talking the talk. She's out on her paddleboard or kayak out in the water doing her social media. So anyway, I'm super inspired to hear from her today. So Sabrina, give us a little bit of background around what you do and how you came to write your book for sure.
So I was a teacher for over 20 years, like Marci said, working in all different divisions. Towards the end of it, I started as a school counselor, and I ended up at a workshop. It was a 3-day workshop on suicide. It was presented by a man named Tony Martins. And at the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. So him and I went back and forth for about a year, and he finally said he would teach me his model of therapy. So I quit teaching and started my own private practice. And the model that I practice is really based on that core belief, feeling not good enough, not important, not valued. And what we basically say is we're constantly trying to prove to ourselves that what we believe about ourselves is true. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm going to be drawn to people, places, experiences, even my own perceptions are going to reinforce and support that core belief. So we need to look past the surface and really kind of figure out where that core belief developed and what we need to do to change that core belief.
So Marci and I, before you hopped on, we were having this conversation. So Marci and I have done a lot of spiritual work around core beliefs, that sort of thing. So for us, it feels like this kind of natural thing that we do. But I think, speaking of core, I think this is the core of a lot of our issues, especially here in the United States. I can't speak for the Canadians, which we love, but I think that is a lot of what's going on. I think people maybe never had a core belief, right? Or don't know what that means to have a core belief.
Awareness around it. We've got them, right? But we're not aware of what they are, which is just primary. It's so important.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Maybe how people show up with you when you're having this conversation about what are your core beliefs.
I think it's there. And when most people are made aware of it, they go, oh, yeah, I know.
Yes.
Right. But the vast majority of my clients, when they come to see me, they're coming to see me because their relationship has struggled, because they have anxiety, because they have anger, because they just feel like not happy, not content in life. And then when we go through and talk about that core belief and feeling not good enough, not important, not valued, they're like, yeah, you're speaking to the choir here. That's exactly how I felt. But you're right. If you're not aware that that's there, how can you do anything about it? You don't even know you need to do anything about it. So what we end up doing is just kind of picking away at the surface, but we're never really getting to the core of what's really going on. So if, for example, I have anxiety, sure, I can teach my clients how to cope with anxiety in about 3 or 4 sessions, but then they have to cope with anxiety for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
If we look deeper and figure out what's causing that, how it's connected to the core belief, challenge that core belief piece, now I don't have to deal with that daily anxiety. I mean, we all have anxiety from time to time, and it's there, but not that crippling daily anxiety that's making us second guess every single thing that we do. But we need to look deeper for sure.
Marci's got me into this, and I've been watching reels, and that's not so good because you can go down a rabbit hole in the reels. However, one of my favorite people in the world is Gabor Mate, and I saw a reel. In fact, last night it was 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I was bad. I know. but he was speaking to me. I guess I needed to wake up to hear this. But so my journey has been from a very difficult childhood. People know this about me, but it's about that piece that you talk about, in that not being seen, not being heard, not being, as if you're not even there, right? And so as a young woman, for me, it was growing up just having that core belief about myself, like, who are you and who cares and all those things. But what happened to me, and I know you can speak to this too, is that you take all that, and because you can't have a voice about it, you can't show an emotion around it, you stuff it down, stuff until the point where you are sick, and you are really sick. And the point being that we think all this emotional stuff is just like, oh yeah, just fix it. But people don't realize the correlation between the emotional health and the physical health, right? Which is essentially where people sort of show up for you, right? They're not saying, oh, I wish I knew what my core beliefs are, I'm going to go talk to Sabrina. They're coming to you because they're in crisis for something that's happened probably, years ago or even generations ago.
Right.
Hence the holistic approach versus just dealing with the symptoms. It's so relevant for so many things.
Right. One of the things we do when our clients come to see me is we get them to go and get a full medical done, get blood work done. Now a bit different in Canada because that's all free, right, through our medical system. So it's much more accessible for sure. But we get them go and get a complete physical done and make sure everything is working the way it was. When I first started doing this in the school system, I was kind of transitioning out to on my own. As a counselor, I was working with a boy who was a teenage boy struggling with depression. And I'd been working with Tony, and he said, you got to get clients to go and get blood work done. So we sent him to get blood work done. And it turned out his thyroid was not functioning properly. And so his depression had nothing to do really with the psychological. It was physiological. Once he started on proper medication for his thyroid, his depression almost completely went away. He created some, unhealthy habits because of that, but that was pretty quick and easy to be able to manage. manage. So we need to look at the whole of a person, not just, what's happening today and what's going on today. It's why is that triggering you today? What's going on with your body? How much physical pain do you have? How much sleep are you getting? Definition of sleep deprivation is 2 nights in a row of not getting proper sleep. Some of my clients haven't slept in years. And so how does that impact our mental health and all those pieces? They're all vital. They all work together. That kind of slowly, one over another, almost kind of cripples you to the point where you are right now today. And if we just try to look at one, we're missing a whole bunch of other pieces.
You said something so important, and I just want to highlight it, the fact that you were able to do that in Canada. You were able to say, we got to start with blood work, and people have the access, and it's accepted practice, and you can just go in there and start there. And it really is very difficult to do that in America. First of all, so I went, once I started learning more of this, I had Kaiser at the time and went and said, hey, I want to have all my levels looked at. I want to know where I am. I'm sort of either in menopause or post. I want to know where I am. And I was told basically, oh, we don't have tests for that. We can't do that. We don't this is the American, very broken healthcare system. And we think, I don't know, someone thinks better to piecemeal it, keep it cheap. But of course, it's manifesting into all of these much bigger problems that don't need to happen, which is costing America and American taxpayers and the American government way more than it would cost in not only money, but pain and suffering and all of these manifestations if we would just come to the core and start there with, let's take a look at where we are. And now what's next versus just throwing pills or whatever at the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like that in Canada too. I think that's a pretty worldly issue where we focus on the symptoms rather than the actual problem of what's feeding those symptoms, for sure. So then we're never really going to get fully to the core of what's really going on because we're just barely scratching the surface.
So you've talked about part of looking at someone holistically. So number one being, let's look at the physical piece. So what might some of your tools or some of your treatment plans look like for someone who may come to see you? So let's just give an example of someone who has anxiety, because that's a big one, right? Let's just start there. And so talk about maybe some of the holistic pieces of what you might do.
So anxiety is pretty much at the very beginning of every client we have, because the vast majority of my clients have anxiety. Almost all of them don't really have an understanding of it, even if they don't have it. And then they have family, friends, colleagues who do struggle with anxiety as well. So we talk about anxiety and what happens. A lot of people feel like anxiety is kind of this cloud that overcomes them and they have no control over it. Once you realize you create your own anxiety, then you can start to kind of manage it and understand it better. So we talk about, the adrenaline, going into that fight, flight, freeze response. So when we sense danger, we go into fight, flight, freeze. That's what keeps us alive. With high anxiety, it's this sense of danger where I'm creating these scenarios in my head where I think I'm in danger. So my body is going into fight, flight, freeze, but I'm not actually in danger. So real danger happening once in a while, not really a big deal. Our body can adjust to it. But this sense of danger where I'm having all these worry thoughts, these what if thoughts, I'm catastrophizing things. These can be happening hundreds, even thousands of times a day. Every time I go into fight, flight, freeze, adrenaline gets dumped into my body. Adrenaline gives me that boost of energy so I can fight or run away. But I'm not really in danger because I'm creating it in my own head. So now I've got this adrenaline dump, but I don't need it. So we see people where they're constantly moving. They can't sit still. They're always fidgeting. It's exhausting on the body. They got sore muscles. They got pains. But the other part is, where does this adrenaline energy come from? It doesn't just magically appear. What happens is all of our non-vital organs get zapped of energy. Bladder, bowel, immune system, endocrine system, stomach, kidney, pancreas, right? So we look at those physical illnesses. If my stomach is being zapped 100 times a day from fight, flight, freeze response, I shouldn't expect it to digest food properly. It doesn't make sense. So we look at that connection with physical illnesses and how it's connected back to that anxiety. Often the anxiety is even what's feeding it. And in all cases, it's going to be exacerbating it Because if I have some other illness, but I've got this high anxiety, my body is constantly in recovery mode, trying to recover from this anxiety. How can it heal the other areas that it needs to heal in? So we look at that. We look at what happens in our brain and how cortisol gets dumped into our brain and shuts it off. That, the amygdala, where that fight, flight, freeze response is really small compared to the big brain. It's never going to win. So cortisol gets dumped in, shuts your brain off. So you can't lose logic and reason, understand consequences, all those pieces. You can't think properly. Once we understand what's going on with our anxiety, then we can start to do things a bit different with it. But a lot of people will say, I just all of a sudden I felt anxiety. Well, it's not how it works. We have a thought that creates a chemical reaction that we then feel in our body. But if we have really high anxiety, often that anxious thought is even in the unconscious. We're not even aware it's there.
Yes.
So how can I do anything about it? So we need to get a better understanding. We often know what our anxiety looks like when it's really, really high, like panic attack, but we don't know what it looks like as it's progressing, which means I'm not doing anything about my anxiety until it's really, really high. Well, now I got a lot of work to bring it down. And I got so much cortisol in my brain, I don't even know if I'm going to use logic and reason to bring it down in the first place. And so we got to get a better understanding of what does my anxiety look like at a 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than a 5 out of 5. Yeah, I can start to put strategies in place earlier, but if we're not aware, we're not going to do anything about it for sure.
Always that first step. All of this talk comes back to this other core belief of ours, and our knowledge of ours is that thoughts are things, and change your thinking, change your life, things we've heard. So, whether it's these, like the core belief, which is just so relevant, and how many people have that core belief that I'm not good enough. I feel like that could be called an epidemic, and when you're coming from that space of not good enough, all that you will manifest. So thought, and then what are you calling in? You're calling in proof that you're not good enough. You're seeing the things that just show, oh, see that I did that, and then saying the negative things to yourself. Stupid, you never get this, you can't do that. Like all of that, it's just self-perpetuating unless awareness. And then you think, well, wait. And this is some work that we did with Brene Brown in her, I think it was Dare to Lead book. She does a belief system work exercise where she has just lists of beliefs or values. The word she uses is values. And then you look through these, and you have to start by circling some, and it's pages and pages. And then you have to narrow it down to 3 core beliefs or core values, things that and it's really difficult because you'll just see a lot of things that yes to that, but to get it down to that 3 gives you then this awareness of, this is what matters to me. This is why I believe I'm here on the planet today. These are my values. These are the things that that set my intention. And now, coming from that place of intention and clarity around what matters to you, that's a game changer for how you move forward in your life. And it gives you this, Debbie called it guardrails. It gives you this little system where when things pop up, you can, if you're aware of your values, if you're really tuned in, you can be like, oh no, that's outside of my value system. No, thank you to that. But this feels right there. And so yes to this, instead of just going out there and doing this and doing that, and maybe, trying things that really don't feel right. Yeah, they don't feel right, but you don't know why, because you haven't done the awareness work to say, oh, I know why this doesn't feel right. It's completely out of my value system.
What we talk about around that too is we usually spend the vast majority of our life trying to do what we think other people want us to do. So I'm trying to make my mom happy, my dad happy, my teacher happy, my coach happy, my friends happy, my coworker happy, my boss happy. All those times are times when I'm not really figuring out what I want.
Exactly.
So now I have to figure out my values. I don't even know what my values are because I spend so much time trying to figure out what everyone else is doing out here. So then I feel lost. I don't really know where I'm at. Reinforces and supports that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, for sure. And that's directly connected to the anxiety piece as well, right? Because what we say about anxiety is actually lack of confidence. If my core belief is not good enough, then I'm likely going to have more anxiety. People often say, anxiety is about the trigger, right? Like I have anxiety of heights. Well, if it was about heights, everyone would have anxiety of heights, and not everyone does. Anxiety is about my belief in my ability to handle it. If I believe I can handle heights, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle heights, I'm going to have anxiety. So anxiety and confidence are almost on a bit of a teeter-totter. If that core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm going to lack confidence, not believe in myself as much, have significantly higher anxiety.
The light bulbs are going off in my head right now.
Totally.
I see Marci
Totally.
going, oh my God, oh my God. Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to
Bobblehead.
go.
That's when we get the bobblehead. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I want to go back to Marci and I are all about thoughts or things, right? Everything has frequency and all that sort of thing. And, I know you talk a lot about language. I know for me, I did a lot of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I don't know how much you do with that, but it really has to do with mindset. And so for me, it was a lot about, because of what happened with my childhood, it was a lot about, I felt guilty for everything. I felt shame about everything. Whatever was going on with my kids, with my husband, it was always my fault. It still is a little bit, but I'm so much better now. But the NLP really worked that out for me. But I mean, it wasn't like, oh, this changes
Yeah.
overnight. This was years of rewire. So talk a little bit about rewiring your brain. I know you spoke about this in some of your workshop work that you're doing.
Right. So, I mean, every time we do a behavior, it creates a pathway in the brain. And the more we keep that behavior going, the thicker that pathway becomes, the easier it is to just go on it. So if we look at, walking, it's going to be a pretty thick pathway. We don't have to think about, right foot, left foot. We just walk. It just happens. For people who have really high anxiety, that pathway is already really thick and heavy. And so to change it, we have to create a brand new pathway. So I'll talk to my clients about, it's kind of like a road. The thick pathway that is kind of like a freeway. You just hop on and go. You don't even have to think twice about it. You just go. But that's my anxiety pathway. Now I'm going to try to create one of challenging those thoughts, reframing my thinking. There is no pathway there. Right. And so I have to, it's like a forest. I have to go in with a machete and chainsaw and hack it all down. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I have to be careful I don't, step in a pothole and roll my ankle. And slowly over time, it becomes like a walking trail and then an ATV trail and then a dirt road. And it takes time to build it up to that, years, right?
Yes.
If I'm 56 years old. If I have 50 years of a behavior and I work really hard and practice a new behavior for a year, it's still only 1/50th of the practice that I've had in the other behavior. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of conscious effort to create a new pathway. If you're not consciously creating it, chances you're going to go back to the old way of doing it. Right. Now, to say that I'm going to consciously stay on one pathway forever, that doesn't even make sense because that's too much work. We got too many things going on in our life. So we have to recognize and realize, oh, I'm back on that old pathway. Okay, I'm going to go back and work on the new one for a while. And we have to kind of go back and forth as we're slowly building that new pathway.
Yes. And the good news is that you can do it, that our brains are plastic, essentially, that we can create these new neural pathways, and it definitely awareness, and it does take time. But it doesn't take 50 years to undo the 50 years you did, because once you start that new one, your brain will adapt. And, we get so much more conscious, or at least hopefully we do. I know this has been my experience. My 50s have been a time of becoming much more intentional, much more conscious, much more aware. And also, luckily, or maybe just by design, it's a time where maybe our kids are a little more able to deal with their stuff, whether they're adults or just getting to that age. So suddenly we do have more time for ourselves, because often we know as women, that's, we're in that caregiver role. We don't get, sometimes it feels like we don't get, watch my verbiage, we should always be taking care of ourselves, but it's harder. It can be more challenging to take time and do that work. So when you become more aware, it does build, and it builds quickly, and it doesn't mean you're perfect. Just like Deb says, you still, or like you said, Sabrina, you could still find yourself on that path, but now you're going to notice it sooner, hopefully, you're going to notice it sooner and say, oops, here I am again, and be able to get back quicker. So
Right.
it's
It's a
all
process that you have to go
Yes.
through to get to that end
Yes.
result. You can't jump to the end. That's just not the way it works.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I say to my
Yes.
clients, when you're trying a new behavior, there's first the awareness where you realize, oh, I'm doing this. Before that, you didn't even realize you were doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you're aware, but then the next stage is you're still doing it, but after you go, oh, I did it again, darn
Yeah.
it. And so
Yeah.
you're catching yourself after. Then you get to the place where in the moment you go, I'm doing it, but you go, I don't care, I'm still going to keep doing it. And you continue to do it. But you're starting to clue in that you're doing it when it's
Yes.
actually happening, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you get to the place where you catch yourself where you're actually doing it and you pull yourself out of it.
Yes.
And then you get to the place where you're not doing that behavior. But
Yeah.
that is a process of
Exactly.
learning and practicing
Yeah.
and practicing and practicing before we get to that final result, for sure.
I love how the Canadians say process. It's so much better the way you do it.
Pro is a good word. That's a strong word. And
Yes.
it's an affirmative word. And on that, like another piece of that is when you notice it, when you have the awareness, don't beat yourself up. Don't be like, oh, you idiot, here you are again. No,
Yes.
it's like, oh, look at me. I can choose better. Here I am again. Oh, it's that process. That road was easier. So I'm back here, but it's okay. I'm going to do better. So taking some of that guilt and that shame and that judgment away can make your process less painful and more enjoyable and more just productive. It's not productive to shame yourself, to blame yourself, to beat yourself up. That is not productive.
And core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued,
Yeah.
Yes.
feeds off of shame and
Yes.
guilt, for sure. What we say about guilt is it's not living up to someone's expectations, usually our own.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it doesn't have a lot of responsibility. It's just something I can use that I can just keep beating myself up over time after time after time again.
Nobody has to
We're go-
know. I'm just doing it.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, what's going on in there? Not
Right.
fun.
Right. Whereas regret, we look at differently. Regret is realizing, okay, I've made a mistake. What do I need to do to adjust it so that it doesn't happen again? It has a lot more
Yeah.
responsibility. It feeds and supports that core belief, good enough, important, and valued, for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
And then shame, I think, is the worst or the lowest. It's back to the core belief. Something's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not. I
Yes.
did this thing and therefore I am bad.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
is
Absolutely.
not true. Not
Lowest,
helpful.
Yeah.
lowest
Yeah.
frequency for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
Yeah.
Lynette,
Never
yeah,
helpful. Never helpful.
I
No.
want to talk about mindset a little bit. I know you do a lot of work on fixed mindset versus growth mindset. We're kind of
Mm.
having this discussion already, but I think not a lot of people understand that terminology. Could you define that a little bit better?
For me, the mindset is kind of all about just, again, that awareness and getting a better understanding. We look at things and kind of say, everything we do for a reason. So if, for example, I go to something that I'm trying to work on, like let's say I'm trying to exercise more, but now it's been 2 weeks and I haven't exercised. Rather than beating myself up for that, we need to look at why am I not doing it? I wanted to do this. What's going
Yes.
on that's making it so that I'm not going there? I'm not doing those kind of things. And so then we look at what core belief, what emotion am I feeling, right? Do I feel not worthy of it? If I don't feel worthy of exercising and being healthy, I'm not going to do it. So I've
Right.
got to go deeper and look at that core belief. Okay, I'm getting caught into this core belief of not good enough, not important, not valued, but I'm challenging myself out of it. So I have to think differently. When I'm talking with clients that are struggling with addictions, they've been sober for a year or 2 years or whatever it might be, 6 months, 3 months,
Mhm.
and now they're thinking about drinking again and they start beating themselves up. What we say is, no, stop. Don't beat yourself up. Stop and look at why. Why am I now thinking about having a drink? I haven't thought about that in 2 months, 3 months, a week and a half, but now I'm thinking about it today. Why? Chances are there's one of two things happening. The first one is that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, is being triggered, or
Mhm.
some things have happened that have created an increase of emotion. And now I need something to suppress and push that emotion back down. That's what those negative coping
Mhm.
strategies, that is the main thing they do, is they push down and suppress those emotions that we don't want to feel. So if I'm all of a sudden thinking about drinking and I look at my last 72 hours, week, I am likely going to find that there's things that have happened in that week that have created a lot of emotion that I have not felt. I've just pushed it down, pushed it down, pushed it down. So now I'm thinking more about alcohol because that's what I use to suppress those emotions and push them down. So the more I understand why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, now I can figure out, okay, this is about the emotion. So I need to do some journaling. I need to look over my emotions list and figure out and try to feel the emotions that I am feeling. I need to sort through and understand. We always need to go to the why rather than just trying to whack the behavior. We need to figure out what's going on underneath it that's feeding it in the first place. And unless we do that and have that understanding, we're not going to have a lot of long-term success. You know, the success rate in Canada anyways for Alcoholics Anonymous is about 3 to 5%. So the vast majority of people who go to AA don't stop drinking.
Right.
Of that 3 to 5%, a huge majority of them switch to anger or gambling. So it just switches from one unhealthy coping strategy to the other, because it's not about the coping strategy. It's what's feeding it. It's this suppressed emotion, this core belief that we don't want to deal with. Then we have to go to all kinds of coping strategies to push those things down so we don't have to feel them.
Right.
Wow.
So that's brilliant.
Wow.
I want to ask you a little bit about the book because in the description, as when I was introducing you, we talked about that it's a way for people who may not have access to counseling to start some of this work. Talk a little bit about how that looks like, how people would take the book and use it that way and
For
what
sure.
to expect.
Sure. So within about 6 months of me starting my private practice here in 2010, I've had a waiting list. And I hate having to tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do. My waiting list has been up to 2 years long. Yeah. Because I'm addressing core belief in people. So people aren't coming to see me for 4 to 6, 8 sessions. My clients are with me for a year, year and a half, sometimes even longer, as we're figuring out where did that core belief develop? What do we need to do to sort through and challenge it and move forward? So my counseling is a long-term model of therapy. So I go very slowly through my waiting list. And so I thought, well, what if I write a book so people at least have a resource that they can use to help them kind of figure things out? So that's kind of what happened. And basically, again, I was a teacher for 20 years, learning assistant teacher, worked with a lot of kids with a lot of anxiety. They don't like to read. So how do you write a book about anxiety for people who have anxiety and don't like to read? It gets a bit challenging, right?
Yes.
So the book is written in very small chunks. There's very few full page spreads that are full text. It's broken up into very small pieces. There's a lot of diagrams, a lot of charts, a lot of activities. So you can read a half a page and you feel like you've got some information. And basically that's what you do is you read a little bit of information and then there's an activity where you take that information and apply it to your own personal experiences. So you're gaining a real understanding at a much deeper level of why you're doing what you're doing, what it looks like when you're doing what you're doing, understanding anger and how anger is often a coping strategy we use to suppress and push down other emotions. What are those other emotions? How does that connect back to the core belief? So we're really taking the general knowledge that I have in this model of therapy and then figuring out ways that you can apply it individually to your own experiences.
I love the work you're doing so much. I also noticed you just had a workshop, big workshop like yesterday you gave away for free or something. And then I noticed that you have lots of other workshops. So around anxiety, building connection, resiliency, parenting workshops. So, oh my goodness, tell everybody how they might be able to access some of those workshops you're doing.
For sure. So my website, trobakholistic.org, has a page on workshops. And so I put on there all the different workshops that I have that are available. I do a lot of workshops through Zoom in person up here in the area, but I'm on I think I'm mile 58 of the Alaska Highway is where I live. So I'm a fair way from big cities. Like I'm a 12-hour drive to Vancouver, 8-hour drive to Edmonton.
Wow.
So I'm pretty isolated where I am. So I do a lot of Zoom stuff if I'm not within my community. So we do
Yeah.
a lot of workshops that way. I do some free Zoom workshops as well. They're posted on my page. The one that I did last night is for my community. So I work with the city of Fort St. John, where they provide the space and I provide the workshop for free. So we're able to provide the information to our community. And I usually do, 2 or 3 in the fall and 2 or 3 in the spring, where we just are able to provide some information for our community.
Beautiful.
Awesome. What about the book?
Beautiful.
How do people grab that book?
So again, there's a page on my website, trobakholistic.org, but it is also available on Amazon. So amazon.ca in Canada and amazon.com in the US. So that's the best way is definitely through Amazon for sure. My book, basically, it's the link to Amazon is where you go anyway.
Okay. I'm grabbing that as soon as we get off.
Me
Maybe
too.
copies.
Me too. Me too. Sabrina, it's been a pleasure. You're inspiring other people to do good work just by giving things away and helping your community. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
And a pleasure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters.
So let's just take a moment to breathe. We'll take 3 deep intentional breaths to just bring ourselves to a place of center and calm. So breathing in through the nose, allow your chest and your belly to fill with air. Pause for a moment at the top of the breath, holding it before you release it. You can blow it out through your mouth, like you're blowing it out through a straw, or just release it through your nose if that's more comfortable. And now again, receiving that breath in, filling the chest, filling the belly, pausing at the top of the breath, and then release it all. Releasing it slowly and intentionally, calming your nervous system. One more time. Breathing in, pausing at the top, and releasing. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please, choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core. Stay well, friends.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.